The meeting is called to order for May 28th, 2020 for the Corvallis School District Board meeting. Thank you everybody who's joining us. Please join me if you are willing and able to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome everybody. Let the record show board member Tina Baker sends their apology. And next point on the agenda is board policy EBCA, emergency procedures and disasters plan. It's the first reading. And would Melissa and Erica want to provide any background or presentation?
This policy is new, and this is about getting us ready for the eventuality of being in the classrooms again with students. And it is a requirement from OSBA for us to, or from the state to get this done. So Erica can talk a little bit more about the template if you'd like, or that we have.
Yes, please.
Okay, so basically we got guidance from ODE on the 15th on how we may be returning to school if we're going to be doing summer programs. And part of that guidance does require that we have policies in place for communicable diseases, which we already do. One policy that was reference that we did not have in place was this one, EBCA, which is emergency procedures and disaster plans. And it just kind of outlines what an emergency procedure plan looks like, in charge, how do we take steps to stop the spread of disease, how are sick students identified, et cetera, et cetera. This correlates with the current plan that we're working on right now in our rapid development teams to look at what it might look like coming back in the fall.
The document that we're working on, the draft that we have working for our emergency procedure and disaster plan is broken down into 3 areas: health and safety, and the person in charge of health and safety is the assistant superintendent; activity and instruction, and the group in charge there is teaching and learning; and then facilities and maintenance. So obviously responsible facilities and maintenance with Kim Patton. And we have 3 within our rapid development team. Each of those groups are separate work groups working on particular requirements that are set out by ODE, OHA, and getting ready for what that will look like in Corvallis schools should we return to school in the fall. And we plan to have the disaster plan, emergency procedures disaster plan finished by June 16th.
Thank you. I would like to ask a first follow-up question. The plan would be shared with the school board as for information only, and we will stay with the policy level, correct?
Yes.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. I really appreciate that, and I think it's very in alignment with good governance practices. I do my research in emergency management, and they tell us for emergency management professionals, make sure that electeds are not in the room and in the weeds. They need to be informed and apprised and stay at the policy level and let the professionals do the work. And I want to acknowledge that this is in alignment with that best practice where there are several venues of response and planning and mitigation that you're addressing through the experts within the district, and the board continues and maintains its oversight through the policy. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
For the policy. Any questions? Vince.
Had to find the mute button. So everything, this is all transparent, unexpected. I'm totally in agreement. The only thing that came up for me as I was reading this is while we're in the middle of a pandemic, and this is related to our response to that, it's also written for other disasters as well. And so I'm curious where there's mention, and I don't know, what I'm concerned with is how's the district going to identify and help people that are at particular risk for a particular disaster. So we're in the middle of a pandemic. So people who are immune compromised might be a particular a person with a risk factor. If say it was a wildfire, could be another disaster. If you had mobility issues, you would be at risk for a wildfire. I'm thinking also of social dimensions, children that are navigating poverty, homelessness, potentially linguistically isolated, people who are English isn't their first language, hearing impaired. How are these people going to be considered in the district response, and how is that reflected in this policy?
That in particular is reflected in the work that we're doing in our rapid development teams, especially, so our focus right now is the pandemic and what it looks like to come back to school with COVID, a reality in our world. So a particular focus on our vulnerable populations, and that includes not only our students, but also our staff who are vulnerable, and what that would look like for them coming back to work. We've also making sure that we have representatives on this team. The rapid development team are building administrators, teachers, classified staff, people who work in all different departments throughout the district, but making sure that they are bringing with them their particular lens for vulnerable populations, special populations, and also ensuring, and it's right in the beginning of every meeting agenda, our equity lens, and ensuring that we're taking a look at all of that.
Yeah, and I this is not a critique of the district. I knew that you guys are doing that work. I think this is another example of where we're seeing tension between our district's practices and our approach to doing the work, and the example of policy that we're getting from OSBA.
I understand.
And I'm just wondering if we need to go back to the policy department at OSBA and ask them about how should districts be considering the social dimensions in their policy when they're developing and considering their disaster response.
Thank you.
So next input from Sarah, and who's up next? Make sure you raise your hand, the participation panel.
Yeah, so I want to appreciate what Vince just said about making sure we're paying attention to all of the vulnerable groups, and that equity is a part of our disaster response. I think we've seen with other policies from OSBA that while OSBA has definitely improved and putting a larger focus on equity, there are times when we are ahead of them. So you know, I'm comfortable with this policy because I'm comfortable with how our district will respond to it. But I see some things that if you weren't in a district that had the same focus as our district does, that you would be missing some people and some details that are key to making sure that we're not leaving behind kids and families and staff members who are vulnerable at this time. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Jay.
I echo what Sarah just said. I trust the people that are working today. My questions go along the area of expertise. That is, depending on the emergency, and in this particular case, it seems to me the emergency is pretty highly centered on health. What health experts do we have that we have placed on our teams? And I would assume it's in health and safety, but I think it might also be somebody in instruction who says X number of feet distance between children is safe and whatever. Who's our health person on this?
On the health and safety team, we have Emily Moravez, who's one of our district nurses, who has a wide variety of experience in nursing. She's a registered nurse, and works for us. She's done public health, and she's also done, hospital work, those kinds of things. So she brings that lens. Our nursing team is very steeped in what's going on with COVID. We talk about it at all of our nursing department meetings. So Emily's the representative there with regard to that. We also we're not like the first thing I told the team when we started is we're not the scientists. That's not our role. Our role is to take the guidance from Oregon Health Authority and ODE and then translate it into what it is that we'll be doing in our own district. So we are taking guidance specifically from documents that ODE and Oregon Health Authority have put together with regard to how we can bring kids back into the building.
And that's my second question. In terms of transparency, have we seen those guidance documents as a board, or I may have missed something? Did we?
Those guidance documents came out on, I think they came out about 2 weeks ago, and they're posted on Oregon on the ODE website with COVID. That is the website dedicated to COVID. And it's just for spring and summer, but we're using it as kind of a launch pad for what it might look like in the fall, because we don't want to be caught on our heels when guidance does come out from ODE for the fall. We're expecting that guidance, Ryan knows better, I think, but I think that we're expecting that guidance to come out mid-June to late June. And we'd like to be prepared and have an idea for our teachers, our staff, our parents about what we're looking at and how ready we are going into the fall.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Jay. Ryan?
Just to add to what Melissa shared. So the rapid development teams that we put together are really thinking about sort of, while this is unique, it's not different than sometimes other things that happen to communities where schools are significantly impacted. The example I give is a tornado and how that can, basically destroy a building, and what does that mean for rebuilding purposes. And if you think about those things in terms of disaster preparedness, what are some common areas that we need to make sure are supported and buttressed? So those are the groups that are meeting are around, one of them is health and safety, one is budget and finance, one is workforce, one is equity, one is educational delivery, one is summer programming, operations, and then social, emotional, mental health. And also, in addition to having a separate equity group, there is somebody on each one of those committees that has whose role it is to maintain that equity focus and ask those questions that help us to make sure that we're continuing to think about all of our kids and all of our families. And going back to Vince's initial question. And so that's the structure that we've been developing over the last week. I announced it last Thursday when we had a district-wide staff meeting. So that's our internal structure that falls under this policy. And those groups will continue to meet. And we know that the guidance is going to change throughout the summer. And so we just know that we have to be able to continue with those teams into the fall. But we also know things are going to change next school year. And so those teams will continue through the 2021 school year, because we know that things will continue to change. So that's the structure that we've created or developed. And that's a number of the questions are going back to that structure.
Thanks, Ryan. Any further questions or comments? We have Vince and then Jay. Oh, okay. So Jay, your hands was up from before. How about Vince?
Yeah, so I realized that I kind of backed you guys up into a corner between me and OSBA. And so I think if you can just go back to OSBA and see if we can just make a mention of policy JBB and just ensure that that we're linking this to equity, and see if you get any pushback from them rather than drafting a new language, just linking to another policy so that we can put this to bed and move on and you guys can get your work done. And so we don't have to take this up later at a later date.
Okay. Anything else? So I do have a question mark. I'm not sure if it should be stipulated in the policy, mentioned in the plan or not. One of the things they say in a business continuity plan, when you want to plan for a disaster, think about how could you do the most important 20 or 30% of your business, whether it's product, service, or mix of those, using 20 or 30% of your personnel with 20 or 30% of your resources. So if you have an earthquake, you might lose staff, property, and you need to focus on the highest priority things that you need to do at the time. And that exercise is really helpful for business continuity, also during budgetary constraints long term. And I know these are two departments or circles that overlap over each other, budgets box, and also business continuity and disaster planning box. So I just want to put that idea out there. If we could have a mention in the plan about how we going to go about prioritizing our outputs, which is instruction and services, and how are we going to prioritize our staffing, and how are we going to prioritize the utilize of our resources, whether it is buildings or technology. In the case of we can't use more than 10 or 20 or 30% of it. I think that would be very helpful exercise and a place for the emergency planning to be considerate of. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Well, see none, this will come back for a second reading, and I want to appreciate the effort and the comments from everyone. So thank you very much. I just want to note for the bond program update, that will be done in the June meeting. So we'll have a full update during the June meeting. The next point in the agenda, however, is the consolidated action, which includes contracts relating to bond construction. And Dale is available here to answer any questions. Kim cannot attend due to Jefferson Design Advisory Committee meeting tonight. So thank you, Kim, for the hard work and for all the advisory committee members who are simultaneously doing really phenomenal and important work with the bond projects. So seeing we are there, as a reminder, everything under the consolidated action is for action. So does anyone have a question about anything in the consolidated action? Vince.
I have questions pertaining to both items. It's more of a general contracts question.
Go ahead.
So Dale, as I was reading through these, no surprises. And I mean, we knew that these items were coming to us, but I'm just curious, is there any penalty for late delivery? We're in a dynamic situation where delivery may be delayed of these. So does the district have any exposure entering into these agreements on delivery of contracted, a clinic and some tennis courts? Is there any penalty, and what are the protections for the district in that event?
That's a good question. And these agreements were generated kind of pre-COVID. The general contract with Fortis does have completion requirements, and the contracts do allow adjustment of those requirements if a legitimate delay impact occurs. And the county is essentially going along for the ride with our contract. I do not remember any specific language about the county's ability to come after the district regarding the schedule. I do know that they are highly aligned with our schedule and that the movement, the relocation of their temporary clinic or their existing clinic and then the opening of the future one are all tied to our schedule. So other than goodwill, I don't believe there's anything contractual that would protect the district from that issue. Yeah,
it's the situation that came to mind was, what if construction at the Lincoln site, had to halt for whatever reason? Could the county come after us and say, hey, you owe us a clinic? Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that, sir. I don't believe that we negotiated that point. It was never seen as a possibility.
But it sounds like there's protection in the general contractor.
There is, yeah. And I believe that I view that as kind of a pass-through contract. They're living under the terms of our contract, and that contract is referenced in here.
So
Right.
if I'm understanding that situation correctly, if we assume some liability due to non-delivery of product, we could then take that liability and transfer it to Fortis, essentially try to recover the loss from the contractor.
That's absolutely true.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Ryan, you want to add something?
Just that during the conversations we had with the county and talking about staging and talking about where they would have clinic operations while construction was going on. So we have had, it's not that conversations haven't gone on, it's that that detail wasn't necessarily included in contracts, but planning around staging and anticipating the staging that would happen between the clinic and the school is something that was part of each one of the conversations as we went along with them.
Thanks, Ryan. Any other questions? All right, seeing none. I would like to ask all those seeing none as I would like to entertain a motion.
I move to approve consolidated action. This is Vince.
All right. Any second?
Second it. This is Jay.
All right. Any further discussion? All right, just give me 1 second. Sorry, we had a technical difficulty. So just to reiterate, now we do have a motion regarding the consolidated action, Lincoln Health Clinic construction agreements and Lincoln Tennis Courts replacement agreement. I want to really appreciate the work that's been going on and the intergovernmental relationship with the county. Really appreciate it for the county commissioners supporting this work. It's going to help a lot. It's the collaboration that we need to see in any community that cares about the health outcome and the education outcome, and they are intertwined and they cannot be separated. And this leadership from our district and the county shows that care and shows how we're demonstrating that our students cannot be healthy if we're not helping them learn, and they cannot learn. Definitely they cannot learn if we don't help them be healthy and find the health support that they need. So really appreciate it. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Aye. Passes unanimously. Anyone against? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Dale. Appreciate it.
Bye, Dan.
So next up is the board member comments. Do we have any board members who wish to make a comment? All right, Sarah.
So last week I had a bad week and lots of people around me had. It's better this week. But I'm still seeing the wear on people I talk to as this drags out longer. I'm also getting more and more questions from parents about what school will look like in the fall. I think as we get closer to the end of this year, the sort of anxiety about what school would look like is starting to ramp up. People are concerned as we reopen a little bit too about school and jobs and daycare for kids. So we really can't make any announcements until we know from ODE what's going to happen with school in the fall. And so I've been, letting people know that those are decisions being made on a state level. But I just think we all need to be aware as we're talking to constituents that that's a big concern. And I think the reality of the juggling that's going to have to happen potentially in a new school year is causing some stress and anxiety among families. I had one parent say, if I've heard people say if we do the distance learning, they're going to find another way to educate their kids. And I've heard parents say, if my kids are in school in masks, I'm going to find a different way to go to school. So there's just a lot of questions and anxiety out there right now. So I just wanted to, that's what I'm hearing from our constituents.
Thank you, Sarah. Ryan, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, so we have been working on a parent survey that is now getting translated or being translated to send out. And it talks a little bit about, while we don't know exactly what the school year will look like, we do anticipate there'll be social distancing measures still in place. And so it goes on to ask some questions about distance learning and online learning, and also some of the things or considerations that would make parents feel more comfortable sending their kids back to school. And so that survey will be going out either tomorrow or the beginning of next week. And that will help us to continue to guide the conversations of our rapid development teams. And at the same time, it will provide additional information to parents that these are the kinds of conversations that are happening right now on the district side. So again, the goal is to continue to show confidence in our ability to meet the needs of kids and families, and at the same time provides some of the reality of what it may look like, and then get their feedback on that. So that's the intention of that document. So Sarah, it may in some ways raise anxiety for some parents who haven't been thinking about it too much. At the same time, and I think everybody's been thinking about it a lot, but just in case, and then those who have been thinking about it a lot, it will help them to understand some of the conversations and things that we're thinking about right now. So, so anyhow, that's gone out. We've done sort of a similar thing with staff, where we've asked questions for them about how they feel about returning in the fall, and some, while not specific with their names attached, but which staff members may have pre-existing conditions and things for us to take into consideration. We know that as a district, we have well over 100 staff members that are 60 or above. And so those considerations come into play as we think about the rollout of next school year. So we're trying right now to develop all of that information for rapid development teams, and also to develop multiple plans for the fall, so we can be adaptive in transition as things change.
Yeah, and Sammy, I can just jump on that same topic. OSBA just got a survey from board members all over the state. Top 3 topics that board members all over Oregon are interested in are planning for fall, distance learning, and then school finance. And if you narrow that down to district administrators, that then you get in some things like legal issues and HR and how to navigate that. So all of this is, we are not alone in this. The whole state is struggling.
Which is also, which is also one of those things that we talk about, in the scenario I gave earlier about one school district in one community, and having to rebuild. This is not just a local issue, it's a national issue. And so there's also some learning that we can gain from one another as we go through this, which there's value in that. So that makes it a little different than if we were one community relying on FEMA to come in and help us through it. We're learning from others in each one of our roles in our positions in our districts.
Jake.
A couple comments. If we had absolutely complete agreement on information that's being handed to parents, like what is the right distance, how infectious is this, at what grades, it would be easy, but we don't. And so I think that's the courage part and the, oh my gosh, hard work part. The second thing that hit me was, I thought I heard the governor say that she was going to urge the health authority to look at a, rather than a total district, a total state blanket of rules, meaning everybody will do X, that they would defer or work with districts on a geographical area, meaning some districts will, everybody's everybody's nature and components might not be the same, and therefore not everybody has to have the same set of guidelines, school bus routes and handling, et cetera, et cetera. So that was encouraging. And then the last thing, and I don't know this you were saying, Ryan, is that we are not going to be the first school system that gets back to school. I think I hear of lots of schools that are going to try getting back together in some form. So we'll be able to lean on their experience, good and bad. So it's not going to be easy. I am absolutely convinced, but if we can lean on those ideas, I think that will be better work.
The one thing I would say is that, Jay, I don't have that same guidance that you have, that districts are going to be open regionally. My understanding is still that it's going to be a statewide opening. Counties will be opened and in different stages of reopening, but schools, I haven't heard that up to this point. I may have missed that in the last day or two, but I haven't heard that. So if you have that information from somewhere, please forward it on to me. Right now we're having weekly meetings as superintendents across the state, and our last one was Tuesday. So sometimes these things are changing so quickly and rapidly that there may be new guidance, but I haven't heard that quite yet.
And I may have misheard, because you may be saying counties and I may have been hearing government. And I guess my question would be, asking for wisdom, why wouldn't they want to not have a blanket set of rules for all schools that are in different geographical / population density, hot areas or not? I'm curious as to why they think statewide rule would make sense, if that's the case. I will go back to my email and see where did I read whatever I read. So.
Want to go, Vince? You want to go?
Well, it's on the same topic. So right now, the governor's executive order 2016 and 2020 are in place until June 30th.
Mhm.
And so that's kind of what we're waiting on. I haven't heard anything as well. I know that there is a lot of confusion among school districts on whether they can meet, not like this, but in person. And those executive orders are still in place, even though counties are opening up. So we're still constrained by those executive orders, and will be until June 30.
Correct.
So what I anticipate is what we've heard about the tension between health and economics and the tension there. I think what we'll find as school districts will be a tension between safety and childcare and the dynamics there as well. And so that's the other thing that Sarah mentioned that we've been thinking about, is what role we play in each of those and which one will be prioritized at the state level. My sense is that it's going to be health, but at the same time, I know that that also causes more challenges for families. So it's something that we're thinking about and aware of, and continue to lean into and have conversations around.
Thank you, Teresa.
Thanks, Sammy.
Teresa, go ahead.
Just quickly on that point, my last understanding from our community college leadership call is that the Oregon Department of Education will set the standard for the earliest possibility of when schools can open. Some school districts that still may not be the best choice locally, but no school district will open until ODE lifts that, and until they lift that restriction. So I think that kind of is maybe somewhere in between what I think I was hearing from Ryan and Jay, that yes, it might not be that every school district reopens at the same time, but no school district is in charge of that decision for themselves. And so alone. And so there may come a point at which, just as school districts didn't close at the same time necessarily until a state mandate came down, they won't reopen until a state mandate says that's a possibility. And there could be, even as I was hearing from our last conversation, there could even be a system in place of applying to be able to open in your district to show that you have a plan that would make sense in your community. And so there may be even some additional data that counties and communities are going to need to provide in order to be confident that reopening is a good choice in that particular community. So I don't think it's going to be a blanket necessarily will be blanket, but I do think that that there is that possibility that they'll hold that bar until they feel like it's okay for everywhere. And I don't have a sense from, at least at the higher education level, that has been teased out entirely yet. So we just continue to wait and see. I wanted to bring up what has already been mentioned, which is that the concern I'm hearing from parents is not just about the school year, but also about what is going to happen, or how are we going to handle things like the aftercare programs if schools do reopen in some kind of modified schedule. And so I just want to put out there, I know you guys are already thinking about that, and that rarely do we bring something for you to consider that hasn't already crossed somebody's mind. But just to realize that should we end up on some kind of alternating schedule system, or should we end up with, needing to do, I can't even imagine what it would look like if we needed to send our kids back in stages to distance them out further. But at any rate, one of the things I'm hearing from folks is concern that if the schools reopen, but the aftercare programs can't support that employers may feel less flexible about work schedules because schools are back. And so just making sure that we're having good communication with our community at large about what reopening the schools really could mean for parents, and what it also probably won't mean, which is that we all go back to our 9-to-5 jobs and we drop our kids off and they all ride a school bus and they all sit in a cafeteria together and they're there Monday through Friday, and then they hang out in the gym after school until we come get them. And so there is I'm hearing that tension of, what if my boss thinks the school has reopened and that means, and then whoops, it doesn't really mean that because my kid's only going Mondays and Wednesdays because we had to split their class in half. And so just to be mindful about making sure we're hitting on that in our communications. The only other thing I wanted to say was just a shout out. We went to pick up my son's school picture today. Garfield was handing out the pictures over at the bus drop off over at CHS. And we pulled up there and we saw, Miss Claudia was out there, and, we got our picture, and it was so great to see the faces of the kids that my son has been in class with, that he hasn't been able to see. Some of the kids have not either chosen to, or it hasn't been possible maybe in their families to get on the Zoom calls. And so there were just faces that he hadn't seen. And he said, when he pulled them out and he looked, he said, "Oh, I'm so glad. I thought I might forget what this one particular person looked like. It's really good to have her picture." And I smiled and I said, "Yeah." And my heart broke a little bit too. But there were these staff out there, and it was hot and it was kind of gross out. And they were out there meeting people with smiles, handing out a little connection to what the year has been for kids, and helping them have a pathway into winding up the formality of the school year with the very classic and so important all class picture. And so it meant a lot to me that they were willing to do that, and that they prioritized in everything that they needed to do, helping the kids get reconnected to that part of their school year. And it was hard to see them and to recognize that, we're not going to see them in person again, because this is the last thing we need. We got our stuff now, right? And so to drive away from that going, oh, that was probably our last face-to-face interaction with someone related to the school year. But in true fashion to the wonderful Garfield staff, it was a very positive one filled with a lot of smiles. So I was glad for that.
Thanks for sharing, Therese. Lou?
I'm trying to remember what it was because it was related to before. Oh, I know what it was. It was more along the lines of being reached out to with what the plans are for next year as school board members. I think it's important for people to realize we don't get to decide that, or even shape what that looks like. And I think sometimes that people forget that that's not up to us. The state is the one who makes that call. And so for folk that do like to provide input, that could be another way for them to do that, is to reach out to people in higher up in the Department of Ed or the governor if they so choose, because they can reach out as citizens of Oregon as well. But I think that that just needs to be a little bit clear that that isn't like, we can't make that call. And as much as we would love to be able to provide clarity, we don't get that information directly either. We get that from the district and they get it from ODE, who gets it from the governor. And so there's this chain of communication that like, we don't get to forecast or get that information ahead of time. I just wanted to throw that out there because it was on my mind as I'm thinking about like the many questions that get asked of school board members as related to going back in the fall. So just thinking about other avenues for people to get their thoughts out there in addition to ours. Like I'm happy to bring stuff that people talk about, but there's also other ways to get some of their concerns heard too. That's all. And there's something else related to what Tree said, but like I'm having like a zoomed out day today, so
It's okay. Probably we'll go through another round and maybe you'll remember it. But I want to thank you very much for highlighting this note. It's very important for us to have that clarity. And I really want to appreciate Ryan's leadership and making sure that communication is clear. When the guidance is updated, he communicate that to staff and to the community and to us as well. So I've been also contacted with the same question, and I would refer people immediately to Ryan and to the websites of the district because they will be really the point of contact about that. And I'll add to it something that Ryan has been telling his staff and sharing in his communication, which is a quote from Dr. Fauci, which is, we don't get to decide the timeline, the virus does. And it's a very, very unsettling fact of hard times like this, where the sense of certainty will not be always as it was. We need to know that there is need for flexibility in our plans, and that as the virus and the pandemic behavior and the impacts of it on our communities changes, plans might need to change. So we will need, the resilience means we will need to be flexible to adapt the right plans at the right time, to try to look into the future. So I really appreciate Ryan being transparent around that, because if we tell people something right now about the fall with 100% certainty, I'm sure it's not going to be accurate. Thank you. Lou, do you remember it? I saw your hand back up. Never mind, Jay.
it was kind of related to what you're talking about now too. It's like reminding me of what Tree said. It's about the communication piece and like how people are relying on things to go back to exactly how they were pre-COVID in the fall. And especially because of like the reality of that's like basically where people's children are during the day. So that then their work shifts are scheduled around that. But I do appreciate the transparency and the communication that has come out from Ryan about what things may look like, and think that that's just going to be super important. And I don't know if that's something that can, is it on the webpage where it says like, thanks for your patience, community. We know this is a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of scenarios. There's no timeline. Is that on the webpage right now?
I don't know.
I don't know that that's on the front of the webpage, but it should be. I know it's in the message that's going home to families for the survey, but it is something that I think is good that we continue to reiterate. Yeah, thanks for the tip there, because it is something that we want parents to know. I mean, this has been a huge change for families. We've basically come into their homes and we've been asking them to participate more sometimes than and they've been able to. And so, I mean, we know that we've created challenges, and at the same time that we're still in the middle of this. So I think any encouragement we can send and communicate what we know and when we know it. Sometimes one of the things about communication is the only thing you know is timelines. You don't necessarily know what to anticipate. And so that's been one of the things I've tried to communicate, has been, here's what we know now, which may not be enough, but here's when we'll get more information. And sometimes that alone is what we're able to share and communicate. So, so yeah, we've been trying to communicate well, and it's always something that we can continue to enhance. So thanks. That's probably something that we should put on there at the front. We're in this together.
Yeah, because it's not only the parents too, right? Like, because we're talking about like community members, employers, and everything may be looking there too for finding information. And unless you have kids that are in school, you don't necessarily get some of the announcements or emails. So just for community updates and transparency, that might be helpful. And I know like a lot of people have a lot of thoughts. So if some of that can be like, yep, up front, like, we don't know, thank you for your patience kind of messaging, I think it'd be helpful. And thanks for taking it into consideration.
All right, let's go for Jay, Therese, and then Sarah. So Jay?
I guess I'm not wanting to beat a dead horse, but the policy we're looking at tonight and the second reading in 2 weeks says, in the case of long-term disruption to district operations as a result of a pandemic flu, the district plan shall at a minimum include, and then it says things like a transportation plan for 6 students, a continuing ed plan for students, a communication plan for staff, which to me sound a lot like the School Board Association is saying districts will come up with these plans, and it doesn't say according to mandates from OHA or anything else. I'm just saying, I think somebody who read this might say, oh, this is good. The district can, at its, within a discretion and within guidelines from OHA, but I think there is some, what would it look like? Maybe some independent or flexibility. I mean, I don't want to say too much because I kind of like some flexibility, but it doesn't to me say that the district will do the plan that the state gives it. It says the district will have a plan. So just throwing out some flexibility perhaps that we might still have.
Thanks, Jay. Therese, and then Sarah.
Sorry, I think I forgot my point. I had something and now I can't remember it. So I will leave my hand up, and after the next person, if I can remember, I'll say it. And if I can't remember, I'll put my hand down.
All right, sounds good. Next
Wait,
up,
I remember.
Okay, good.
It was that fast, huh? Couple questions I got from parents about iPad access over the summer and whether the kids will be able to continue to use those, and if the programming like the IXL program that our elementary kids are using for math, or RAS kids, things like that for reading, if those are going to continue to be supported and available over the weekend or over the summer. I don't know the answer to that. What can we, has the district made a decision, or if so, is there a communication that we can send out to parents to let them know whether those devices will be available to their households?
Good question. Ryan or anyone from staff would like to answer. Melissa, you want to take this one?
Sure. iPads and the Chromebooks are going to be left in the hands of students throughout the summer, unless they're students in 8th grade, and we're going to ask them the last week of school to exchange their iPad for a Chromebook. So they won't be left without a device. They'll just have access to their new device that they would have received when they got to high school. And as far as the programs, those are some of them are so individual to buildings. We're going to allow principals to kind of make those announcements by building as to what it is that students can access throughout the summer. But the device definitely is staying with the student over the summer.
And will the hotspots that we have supported to expand access, will those remain as well?
Yes, we're not taking those back.
That's marvelous. And if we could share that, if we could send out that communication in
Sure.
a very public way, I think there are many parents that would be really excited to learn
Okay.
so thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next up, Sarah, then Jay.
Yeah, that news about the hotspots is fabulous. I overheard a Zoom conversation among 4th graders this week where they were saying, can we keep having Zoom meetings? Can we? And I just sat there thinking, oh, your teacher doesn't need to be doing Zoom meetings all summer. But kids are really craving that connection to whatever little piece they can have right now. My comment was sort of following up on what Lou said about community members and businesses potentially looking at the website for information about what school's going to look like to anticipate their employees' flexibility in the next year. I would suggest that there are a lot of employers who don't have children who may not even have this on their radar. And so I don't know how we could do it, but I think it needs to be very public knowledge that school may not look like, and school schedules may not look like what they did at the beginning of March, and that daycare is not going to look like it did at the beginning of March, because part of the concern that as I am asked about what reopening is going to look like is people saying, I don't know how I'm going to go back to work if it doesn't reopen. And so I think employers, I don't know how it's not really our job as a school district to educate employers on behalf of our parents, but it is something that could be done that would potentially really help out some stress on our families to make sure the community is aware as soon as we're able to give. It's hard to say without solid information about what it's going to look like, but just make sure the community is aware that what happens in schools is going to impact the broader community in a big way.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting that. I think that's a very important aspect. Having really good situational awareness across different stakeholders here is going to be very important. Well, with that, I would just want to say we're approaching the end of the time for this meeting, since we need to get set up for the next one in a few minutes. So any urgent comments, last minute comments or questions from our board members? Well, seeing none, thank you everyone, and thank you staff, and we will be seeing most of you or all the board members at 6:30 for the budget meeting. And for those who are watching on the YouTube channel, it will be a different link, so you need to go to the YouTube channel for the Corval School District, and the budget meeting will be streaming in a new link. Thank you everybody, and if there's no objections, the meeting is adjourned. All right, see you all soon.